Okay, this is Dr. Mark Carriage with another presentation on group techniques. This is part 4 of my group series, or part 8 of my group series on second part of group techniques. Okay, as I mentioned in other videos, I mentioned the same thing. I've been around a long time, been running groups since '84. Uh, I've been in the field for 45 years. I got a bachelor's degree in '79 from SIU Edwardsville in psychology, master's degree in 1981 in counseling from St. Louis University, and a PhD in counseling '85, St. Louis University. Now, of course, in your undergraduate degree in psychology, they don't really teach you much about how to deal with people. Well, they did teach you how to train a rat, and I ended up taking my rat home, unfortunately. But that's a whole nother story. Uh, but in the graduate programs in counseling, you learn how to work with people, different strategies, techniques, etc. And in my internship, I did a counseling psychology internship at Texas Tech University from '84 to '85, which really prepared me for the professional world. And then I spent the last 40 years in the prison system. Um, so I did retire from the state in 2012. I had 27 years in then. I ran a lot of program stuff for sexual people that have sexual aggressive issues, and saw a lot of psychiatric cases and such. I'm currently working in private practice under Chad Welch at Metro East Counseling. Metro East is in the Metro East of St. Louis, in the Illinois side um, of things. We're in Swansea, Illinois. And lastly, um, I'm consulting at TCI, which is Transitional Center Incorporated at Chicago, not Chicago, I'm sorry, Colchia Heights, Illinois, which is in the Metro East of St. Louis as well. I can be reached on at email mcarich at AOL.com. And don't be trying to call me because on my phone, because I don't usually answer unless I recognize the number. Matt Adams is not present today, but he is the one that's helping me get through this YouTubing stuff. I'm getting used to it now a little bit. And so he's really instrumental. He's a therapist in the office as well, part time. Okay, so the intro to this module is I give you my usual intervention spiels. Um, I published a number of books on this stuff as well, of therapy techniques and group, along with many other topics. So, any interventions in group can be used within the group context. The differences in group, you can use individual interventions, and I have done tremendously, but you want to get the group involved in the process part and then get them involved in the intervention too, as well. So individuals within the group can be targeted as a whole. But again, get the group involved in the feedback and the application to that member. A lot of times well, groups are ran differently with different folks, but you can, a lot of times, individual tactics are used with different members of the group, but then the point of the group is to actually process the interventions and help process whatever the member's going through. Remember that. You want to use the group as a central focus point. So there are numerous skills and techniques because I published a training manual on that. um, called, I don't even know what it's called, but I don't even know. But anyway, it's on techniques, therapy techniques, and I collected because I've taught various graduate level classes on the topic and done workshops on it. And there are numerous techniques, interventions, skills, whatever you want to call it, out there in the literature, and they can be used in group if you get the group involved. There are also a number of group oriented techniques, and that's what I went over in part 7 of this series. And today is more individualized techniques, but we're going to apply them to the group context. Again, use any techniques you want, interventions, whatever you want to call that entity, um, with individuals or individual members in the group, but get the group members involved itself. It's all starts with basic communication skills. What do I mean by that? I think intervention is nothing but a communication skill or a communication technique. It's all communication, even our verbal and nonverbals. Heck, if Milton Erickson, the great hypnotherapist, can shake an individual's hand and put them in a trance state, any nonverbal behavior in group is an intervention or it can detract. One time in group, a new social worker started, and she was an attorney by trade, but went to social work. And so in those days, um, I guess they still do it, but I wouldn't do it. Now we go around the room and I do introductions, but they used to introduce how many victims they had and all this stuff. And one guy said he had 43 victims, contact victims, etc. And so she had this like freaking out, deer in the headlight look. So the guy stops and says, "What are you even doing here, working here as a therapist if you don't like us?" So I waited for her to respond, which she didn't, of course, because she was in all land. So I said, "Well, you know, so and so, you don't like what you did, right?" "No, I hate what I did." Blah blah blah. I said, "Well, that's what she's responding to is what you did, not you." Okay, let's continue with group. So the point I'm trying to make um, is your nonverbals can be interventions as well. And I did talk about that a little bit in the last part 7 of this series. Now, target intervention targets. What are you trying to do? You trying to hit the member? You trying to hit the interpersonal pieces of the group? You trying to hit the whole group? You got to decide what interventions you're doing for what. There's intensity, and I mentioned this in the last video. The impact of the intervention. You got low intense, uh, which is mild, kind of low key impact. Moderate intensity, much stronger impact, stronger dose, and then high intensity, which really creates a big impact. It's an aha moment, if you will. Different forms or types of intervention include, excuse me, conceptual, verbal, and interpersonal. Um, you're actually addressing issues and concepts, delivering concepts in group. Experiential is an activity like art therapy, drama, movement. I've been involved in some drama. The most drama I do in groups would be role play. We used to role play a lot, but I've been involved in some psychodrama stuff. And art therapy, I've supervised people with art therapy, and art therapy is wonderful. I don't do art therapy. I can barely do stick people. But I'm telling you, it can move people, and that's the whole point. So you can do it in a group. And then experiential also includes nonverbal activities, other exercises evoking emotional responses, if you will. Now, structured activity is pretty much, we used to call it in the old days, task assignment, homework task assignment, if you will, or even task assignment Depends on when you deliver the intervention or the task and expect it to be um, discussed. Well, discussing the task is a key point. So it can be done in workbooks, exercises, but make sure you process whatever the assignment is. And get the group involved, of course, get the group involved. Basic principles of intervention. There's respect, where you acknowledge the client as a unique person. You may disagree with everything about them, but you still have to respect them as somebody with worth. And of course, I worked with a lot of deviancy. And from a holistic approach or viewpoint, you view the whole person, not just the targeted behavior problems. And my history would have been targeting a lot of the deviant stuff with clients. Rapport, connect, and make psychological contact. You want to engage the group, engage the membership and the members. Then that's when cohesion will start to evolve. Compassion. You want to understand. You want to have empathy, perspective taking with emotional elements attached to it. Understand what the client's going through. Understand what the group's going through, and be able to relay that back to them. Flexibility. That means pliability. I looked it up in Webster, and that's exactly what it means. So flexibility is the ability to adapt to things. When things come up, things emerge, you can switch gears, you can target it, work with it, utilize it, which leads to the next one. Utilization principle is Milton, the hallmark of Milton Erickson. All this stuff could be under Milton Erickson. It could be under Adler, except for the utilization principle, as well as Rogers. But the point is, I'm trying to make is the utilization principle is utilizing whatever the client presents or throws out there, or in this case, we're talking group, whatever the members present. Um, if let's say you do this fancy intervention you thought about for 10 years and you decide to deliver it one day in group and it flops in your mind, it doesn't reach the goals, it doesn't do anything. So you utilize the client's responses towards goals or change. Um, so you don't see it as just a failure, you just utilize it moving forward. Responsivity principle. That means you're being responsive to the learning to the client, um, the personalities of group members, to the group personality, to the needs of the different membership, their learning styles, and etc. Steps to delivery intervention. I had pinpointed that there are generic, and I think I did a video. I'm going to be doing a video on that when I hit the therapy thing series, where I looked at the generic structures, generic components of therapy, of all the models, the spectrum of models, theories, orientations, approaches, whatever you want to call that entity. And there was generic components across the spectrum. And so this is one way generically to deliver interventions. No matter what you're doing, you can think about it in this way. And you can commit this to memory where it's automatic. Like, what are the goals? What am I trying to achieve? What's the therapeutic goals, objectives? Um, Establishing rapport. Always have that connection with the other person in group. The group members is a little more cloudy because you've got more than one person there you got to deal with. Establish a change contextual frame. Select your therapeutic messages. What are you trying to get across to the client, to the group, to pick maybe particular members of the group? And then look at your intervention options to deliver it. Actually, deliver the intervention and then monitor, and utilize the outcome. Very simple. Commit it to memory, and you'll have a better day as a professional. Okay, basic communication skills. These are just real, the rubric of therapy. Um, This is basic 101, but I'm going to tell you what, if you get stuck in situations, go back to your basic communication skills and it will get you out of them. I forgot to mention that this video, as all my videos, unless otherwise mentioned, are for professionals in mental health. They're not for anybody else other than professionals, not for kids, but for professionals. So we use a lot of jargon and a lot of stuff because we like to talk psychobabble in the field because it's a psychobabble field. Be like if you're in computers, you talk computer babble, which I don't have a clue what that is, but whatever. Okay, so the basic stuff. Um, I've already talked about respect. That would be a communication skill. So let's get into it. Clarification. You can use open ended questions or even closed questions to try to clarify what's going on with vague stuff. Unless you're delivering vague generalities as an intervention to create confusion so that the client has to sort out at an unconscious level the meaning of it all. But that's very specific. I I generally do that only when I'm trying to target something. So it's not that common. Confrontation, when you're challenging, pointing out discrepancies or whatever you're pointing out, you're challenging the client. Empathy is the basic building block of all therapy. That is, you have perspective taking of what your client's going through. You understand the content and feeling emotional tones expressed by the client. Um, and even those that aren't really expressed, but the client's harboring, if you want to go to advanced empathy. Okay, paraphrasing. And again, I did write a book, co-authored a book, training manual on techniques, and these are specified in the manual and in some of my other works as well. Okay, paraphrasing. So you're engaging in a concise, accurate, clear phrasing of what the client expressed. You use statements, not questions. Now, later I have active listening, as you can see, and that's conveying a fuller understanding. So a lot of people use these as interchangeable. I do too. We're splitting hairs. We're arguing over stuff that doesn't really matter. The point is that you're relaying to the client what's going on with them. Very similar to empathy. Reflection of feeling. That is that you know what the content of what the client's saying, but you're able to reflect back some of the emotional tones. Self-disclosure, disclose where you disclose some of your own stuff. Uh, One of my pet peeves is that the group is not for the therapist. If the therapist needs a group, go get your own group. Go get your own therapy. This is for the membership of the group. Two rules. If you have a highly antisocial, meaning criminalistic oriented, exploitive type clients, members in the group, you do not want to share a whole lot. They will utilize it against you usually, unless it's a very cohesive type. So you want to minimize what you disclose and generalize it, and so that you're okay with whatever you disclose could be put on a billboard, because that's essentially what could happen. But you do it to normalize the process of people, members, self-disclosing and also giving hope to other members. Back in the 60s, 70s, up into the early 80s, it was the thing. It is no longer the thing to do as much. So be aware of what you're doing. In other words, um, and I don't have time to get into examples and stuff, but I've seen groups where the therapist you thought was a group member actually, and I've had group leaders come into a group, which I told the boss not to let in the run the group because I was going to court that day, but he did anyway, and she was torn apart by the group, and it was not a good experience all the way around, and there was a little bit of confrontation and challenging when I got back. But she was totally neutralized out of that group. She was like, because they knew they sensed she was a victim and tore apart in group. She was in tears, but they told me the day after that we put her back together for you. Right? They never did. They never pulled that stunt again because they just wanted to see if she was a victim. So anyway, that's my thing on self-disclosure. Little pet peeve there. Summarizing, you want to make statements summarizing what's going on. The use of silence. Silence can be very useful because it sets up very awkward moments. And people's going to jump in to fill the silence because they can't stand it. I already talked about active listening. So I messages, that's when you're saying I because it denotes responsibility and maybe people will catch on. Okay, CBT. There's all kinds of CBT techniques. We use it inside out, whether we're considered CBT or not. But the techniques are great because usually they're in a form of writing. Although I've completed a list of other CBT techniques that were in imagery and other things, but that's not for another day. So you can have clients in group, but make sure again you process the interventions. Create lists of using dichotomies, likes, dislikes, positives, negatives, fears, hopes, problems, changes, etc. Write about any type of concern. Make list of goals. Make list of how to get there. Make list of how it is that you hope to be. Blah blah blah, and the list goes on. That's CBT listing techniques. Again, use the group to process. Identify and labeling. That's attaching the meaning to certain things that happen in group events or what people's going through so people can at least have a understanding of what the heck's going on. Use humor, but do not laugh at the client. Laugh with the client. Okay, warming up. Sometimes we might do chit chat stuff to warm up. Some people use formal warming up techniques. I don't care for that. I like to do chit chat nonsense stuff and get once, but you don't spend the whole group doing that. You spend a few minutes doing that. Seeding ideas. That was Milton Erickson. One of the things he did was plant suggestions to be followed up later. So you can drop little tones, little things in the group and then nurture them and follow them up later. Tone setting. That's when you set the tone by your own action words and allow stuff to emerge and happen. You can always, and I mentioned in the last video, use eye contact, eye scans, scan for cues, redirect people's comments by scanning, that whole thing. Providing support through encouragement, affirmation. That was a big thing of Adler. Encourage, affirm. Marshall said it was one of the key constructs of, or factors of why treatment is successful. He had 4 factors. That was one of them. Reality testing. Do reality checks like what's going on in a group because the group will have its own co-constructed social reality as because you're a part of it. So intervening meaning stopping, interrupting. You can do that. You can intervene, interaction, stop. What's going on? You can use silence. You can go radio dead and just let see what happens out of the group anxiety. Oh, the old gestalt facilitating closure, finish unfinished business type techniques, which are effective. Goal setting, establishing behavioral goals so they can see they achieved it. How do you know when you're going to be there? Okay, you can promote CBT, writing activities in and out of session. Again, process everything with the members in the group. Repetitive listening, I made this up as I was reprogramming some people's brains at one point in time, and you start out by saying I choose to whatever, and you have them write it over and over, page after page, page after page. Some more CBT like journals. And again, if you're doing having folks do a journal, you need to take some time and process what's going on, and then typically your journals are done by entering date, time of the entry, the event. I like to break it down into thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, like what's going on. And that includes tracking behaviors, anything that tracks something. Writing reports, you can have people write on specific topics and etc. The autobiography is a life history. We had people write out their autobiographies. One guy wrote 2,000-page deal, man. I said, dude, can you cut it down to like 100 pages? And he did, typed. But he liked to write. I mean, I think he put in there when he went to the bathroom. Anyway, you could also do a future autobiography. I was having groups do future autobiographies as they would project themselves into the future, a little form of future projection, and they would see themselves accomplishing whatever, um, meeting their needs appropriately as we now use life plans. But what they see themselves in relationships, all kinds of whatever they're working on, or how they see themselves in the future with change. Contracts.